Hi, this is a continuation of the basic study of the duality according to the rayed system. The duality we started with was the experience of flower and jewel as two different halves of a electromagnetic, constrictive, expansive, and we could talk about these varying combinations of these two forces for a very long time. But for me, it's always been about these two types of forces, the constrictive force and the expansive force together create a dynamic kind of energy. And we're going to describe that relative to the iris. So flower, and there are many different types we could talk about. Technically, we're going to talk about this being really a stream flower. And this is a jewel, maybe even technically a stream jewel. And this is what we're calling a shaker jewel and shaker flower, and we're going to describe what's the difference that qualifies something as a shaker or a stream, and why those two strange terms. Shaker, well, honestly, shaker to me means something that is dynamically mobile, something that is creating change, or something that is circulating, it's something rolling or rumbling or whatever you want to call it. It's a dynamic type. I mean, all of them are dynamic in their own way, meaning that the flower type is dynamic because it's a type of radiant, expansive flow. The jewel is dynamic in its own way because it is a focused form of compressed piercing. So these two piercing and expansive qualities, when they're combined, they'll produce shaker flower or shaker jewel. If you look closely, you can see what we call the flower patterns, which are these open webs like the petals of a flower. But now you also see the existence of tiny dots. So you see a brown dot here, maybe not as clearly on the camera. You see one here as well, and the beginning of one here. Just a slight amount of a distinct jewel brown dot in the same constitution as a flower produces by its very nature a dynamic circulation within that constitution. So this type of structure where you have a lot more flowers than jewels, we call that shaker flower. That just shows the dominance of flower to the number of jewels. On the other side, you can see obviously a broad number of jewels, but you can also see a series of small webs. Whenever you get the webs or the flower patterns, you have the emanating or expansive force in combination with the constrictive force, but dominant to the constrictive, so we call that shaker jewel. Shaker being a combination, shaker jewel meaning dominance to the number of jewels, shaker flower meaning dominance to the number of flowers. Why is this really important? Because it shows that very small amounts of the opposite structure actually change its quality of energy to a completely different category. Now, why that's so important, if I were a pure flower and I have one quality of energy generally, my life force is flowing in one continuous way, if I will choose to learn a small amount by my own volition or will, some form of personal self-discipline, for example, I can actually provide enough constriction to create a dynamic change in my own life force. And if I'm a jewel type person, then I can become objective to the fact that my jewelness is producing constriction and identifying that as having positive attributes. A very small amount of the flower quality that I would choose to learn takes my normally constrictive quality, adds a little flower. Now I'm into another range or magnitude of life force movement. So shaker is life force movement. Shaker jewel, slightly more constrictive. Shaker flower, slightly more expansive. Now we move into the, if you will, the next or fourth quality, which is essentially what's called the stream. Now, that's a controversial term, this quality of stream, because the nature of the stream is really within the structure there is such a automatic equilibrium between the constrictive forces and the expansive forces that it produces almost a neutrality. This neutrality gives it a capacity to be cohesive like a constriction. So stream is actually a constrictive force in the same way that the wood on a tree holds the tree together, but it's composed of both minerals and water, very different than minerals alone or water alone. So the stream quality is a cohesive gathering force. Now that stream can be dominant to flower, hence stream flower, or that stream can be dominant to jewel or stream jewel. Now this is one of the best examples of a pure stream structure with a small amount of jewel, and later on we'll go to why the positions are there, but stream jewel, stream flower. But part of this is to remember the dynamics of what it feels like, because nature is an excellent teacher. So when we're talking about jewel, we can talk about crystal or diamond or rock. So we can talk about that constrictive force, and we realize that there are a wide range of mineral composites to what the jewel looks like. So we can take all the minerals of the periodic table of chemistry, which are all crystals. We can take all of the minerals in the earth, which nearly all of them are crystals. And all of these crystals have different colors and different ion configurations. All of them, topaz is different than sapphire, and amethyst is different than something else, and lead and gold and mercury are all crystals actually. So all of the crystalline structures are a wide range of jewel. Then you look at all of the qualities in nature about everything that produces a color, like a flower. All of these are like flower upon flower upon flower, is the constrictiveness of the mineral kingdom added to the dynamicness of water and the minerals coming into the world. So all of the colors also represent the constrictiveness of the jewel. Colors, jewels, crystals, minerals, wood, whew, they're all part of a dynamic system. So the stream structure is how it's cohesive. So the stream structure is commonly attracted to the shaker pattern. So within myself, how many qualities of stream do I have? Well, thankfully there is enough streamness in me that I have a constitution in my body. I have a shape. I have a cohesiveness in my body, which represents my ability to regenerate myself. Actually, there's a cohesiveness that holds my cells together. I have cohesiveness in my posture. I have cohesiveness in many different ways. Even in society, the stream structure likes cohesiveness in a group, whereas the shaker structure is a dynamic liberating force, or at times a destructive force. So the shaker energy is like an earthquake or a volcano at times, or it can be like a stroke of lightning or a sudden traumatic event. Because if you get too much cohesiveness in nature, like too much density in the brush and it's hard for things to move, a forest fire comes along and liberates it by a sudden change, and then the whole mineral composition changes, everything changes. So in the structure of the eye, we look at it. Primary structure, jewel or flower. When I look at someone, the first thing I want to decide, am I dealing with a jewel or a flower? To what degree are they flower or jewel? Then I'm going to look at, to what degree is the substructure or the secondary influence? Is it a lot of stream or a little bit of stream? Is it very dense or less dense? Some structures, for example, like this one here, if you look at the various degree of density, and this structure being a little bit more dense in the vascular system, or the structure of the eye, that's really remarkable to consider that this is not just tissue or fascia, this is a circulatory system. So this is a vascular system circulating. Both of these are, but now look at the subtle differences between them. Yes, you can see brown dots clearly in some cases. By the way, it's much easier over here than out there to see these little brown dots. But you see how there's also a degree of openness generally in the fiber arrangement or the fascia. Can you see how this is slightly more open? Anytime you get more constitutional openness, you get more of the expansive quality. Anytime you get more constrictive density or depth or diameter, you get more constrictive force. So I'm always looking at to what degree does the structure have constrictive cohesive force, to what degree is it dilating. All of this put together, you can spend a lot of time trying to define the broad range of one type or the other. And there's an infinite number of the ways that these two types fit together. So we call the shaker flower, it's a dynamic expansive. The shaker jewel is a dynamic constrictive, which means their tendency to be more rapid or more intense or more piercing when it comes to the experience to seek in some form or another. So this is the duality function of flower and jewel modified by combinations of jewel and flower and combinations of jewel and flower on the opposite side with more jewel. This is more of an understanding about the different ranges. But if you give yourself an opportunity to feel what it feels like in nature, how nature has a stream structure in the plant kingdom. The plant kingdom is a cohesive connection between kingdoms. So the plant kingdom connects the mineral kingdom to the animal kingdom, all of it by the dynamic flow of water or feeling. The mineral kingdom has one rate of mobility. The plant kingdom has a different rate of mobility than minerals, and how the animal kingdom has a different rate of mobility, all of them fed by the same components of minerals and plants and water. Nature is a remarkable teacher about the divine order of the universe. So the iris to me is really an expression or a reflection of how the human being is very much a part of nature. So that's how I experience the eyes. So questions from our beloved audience?
I have a question. So, are you saying that the stream jewel is the most yin? Because it's the most
That's
constrictive
correct.
and
So
cohesive?
the jewel is yin and constrictive, and the stream is also constrictive. So whenever you get constrictive on top of constrictive, you get, yes, a more constrictive or more yin. Great. In that regard.
And so that the shaker flower is the most expansive.
That's correct, because flower is expansive and shaker is also expansive, so shaker flower is the most dynamically compelling type.
Okay, okay.
Yes?
Can you give a quick relationship attraction between these?
So the natural relationship attraction is, generally speaking, and particularly in relationships of the opposite nature, flower attracts jewel. They like it because the energy begins to move when jewel and flower relate. Now, if you have a stream flower, they usually like the opposite of shaker jewel, because those are opposites. If you have a stream jewel, they usually like shaker flower. So there's a series of opposite dynamics. So if you examine about why they're attracted to each other, is because the nature of magnets, they come together and the energy starts to circulate, and that produces the dynamic attraction. This circulation, which exists not only in the spirit body, but starts to now circulate the life force from the spirit body into the material body, changing the glandular secretions and the quality of the hormonal attractions that we call body chemistry between types. So that's a basic relation. Another time we'll really go into the relationship component of jewel flower, stream, and shaker. But one of the interesting things about this, discussed on another video, is the physics of this. The physics for me meaning that in physics there are 4 primary forces, or 4 primary energies. One is electro, which is constrictive. Another one is magnetic, which is the experience of the opposite but also creates movement. Another one is force. This is what happens when you get these two together. It creates mobility. The 4th one is gravity. So gravity is a holding, binding force that's very much like stream. So stream is a cohesive, gathering, grounding force, while the force experience is dynamic shaker pattern, and they're 2 opposite energies which are opposite the constrictive, dynamic, if you get the general idea, right? So by being able to see this, okay, if I want to be objective to myself and I see how nature works, what can I do with myself? Can I choose to increase my constrictiveness? There's an interesting experiment. I've actually explored this many times. Can I increase my flowerness? Can I increase my shakerness? Can I increase my streamness? Can I do something that is deliberate because I desire to do that? Can I open up my capacity to be alert, to be clear, to be aware? Can I increase my capacity to feel, to be emotional, to be responsive? Can I increase my capacity to be dynamic? Can I increase my capacity to be firm, to be stable, to be cohesive, to be gathering? All of these are terms that reflect choices I can make. So one of the reasons why we do this is this gives us an understanding of the duality of the many sides of myself. So this is another continuing discussion about the self. The self later on will be another one we'll do about the source of how we make choices and how these choices lead to different forms of experiences. So this is the experience of duality relative to flower and jewel, shaker and stream, and all their combinations. So hopefully this has at least answered some of the basic questions, though by now some of you are actually beginning to develop some of the very important questions, which is, well, really what does it all mean, or what are we going to do with it? First we have to have the willingness to be sincere, to objectively be aware of what we are, to understand our true self or ourself and our actual condition before we want to change into something greater or more. So for those of you who might have questions, feel free to submit them. We'll do our best to get to them. See you next time with some other form of unusual discovery. Be well.